Today, we welcome Roy Osing, a business maverick who turned a startup into a billion-dollar success story. With over 40 years of executive leadership experience, Roy is the author of Be Different or Be Dead, a passionate advocate for audacious business strategies. Get ready for game-changing insights from this former president and CEO and CMO. So at this point, Roy, I was hoping you could give us a little bit of your backstory and a little bit of the detail as to what has brought you to where you are today.
Well, first of all, thanks, Michael, for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to reach out to your audience and share my passion with them.
For sure.
I'm a simple guy. I was born and raised in the interior of British Columbia, Canada. And at a very early age, I guess, I was a bit of a maverick in the sense that I never really liked to do things the way everybody else did them. According to my mother, at that time, I was the guy that sort of said, well, all right, if you're going west, I'm going to go east and we'll try and figure that out. And so by my very nature, I was sort of a contrarian, different kind of guy. And by the time I went to university and left university and to get a job, that seemed to be part of my DNA. And so I joined a telephone company out of university at a time when they were a monopoly with no competition, really.
Sure.
And I stayed with them until we reached the point where the business was becoming competitive and technology was changing very, very rapidly. And the internet suddenly was dawning as an opportunity, and I was asked to take on the challenge of creating an organization that would unleash the power of the internet for shareholders. So I became president and tended to practice the same kind of stuff, right? So differentiation, being different, was part of who Roy was, and I just took it wherever. It was in my backpack, and I just took it wherever I went. So we created a company that was in the early stages. So it wasn't a brand new in the sense of a startup. It was in the early stages of the data world. And we basically worked our butts off over a number of years to take it to $1 billion in annual sales. And today the business is $18 billion. And so we like to think that we had a little bit of a role to play in that development.
I love it. I love it. And what company was that?
So this was originally, it was BC Telephone Company, small provincial telephone company in Canada. And laterally, it became known and is known today as TELUS, which is a national carrier. And it actually, under the leadership of Darren Entwistle, who was the CEO, it's the most successful company in the world in terms of shareholder value increase. Okay, in terms of year over year over year. And so Darren has been very successful building value in this company, and yeah, I'm delighted to draw a pension, one of the few pensions I guess around these days.
Yeah, things have changed. I'll tell you, when my dad first took his job after being in the military and then graduating on the US GI Bill from North Carolina State, he actually took one of those rare jobs that provided a pension. But I think that's a very different a very different strategy nowadays. But
yeah, completely different. But
can you share, like, one of the most audacious moves you made during that time that you feel really contributed to hitting that billion dollar mark?
Yeah, and the first thing I have to make is we had no idea whether it was going to be $1 billion, whether it was going to be 500 million, whatever. Okay, what we knew was the opportunity and the potential was huge, and the challenge for us as a leadership team was to figure out how to kind of like take advantage of that. And so I'm a context guy, and so I don't believe in chasing tactics. So what we did, the first thing is I had to create a strategic game planning process. Okay, in other words, a process to actually define what your strategy is going to be. And the reason I had to do it myself was I looked around, and the traditional tools that were available simply didn't work for me. Okay, it took too long to create a strategy. It was too expensive. It wasn't focused on execution. And I thought, you know what, if we're going to make significant inroads into this business, into this opportunity, we've got to hit the street running. We got to get going. All right. And so I created this process, which was kind of audacious, which really resulted in creating a strategy for the business in literally by answering 3 questions. And so Roy's strategy process is as follows. The first question is, how big do you want to be? That's a question about declaring your growth. And it's all about top line revenue. It's not based on bottom line, profitability or EBITDA, because you and I
Sure.
both know we can re-engineer an income statement, give you whatever you want, but you can't run and hide from top line revenue. That's a reflection of what customers think about the value they get from you. And so what we did is the process says, okay, where do you want to be in terms of top line growth in 24 months? This is not a 5-year plan. And the problem with 5-year plans, of course, is the 4th year never shows up. You give yourself permission to put things off. And so by focusing on 24 months, it gets this execution sort of orientation and bias ingrained in the organization. And so we would set yearly growth goals, which were pretty audacious. The second piece of the equation is where you're going to get the money. And I call it, who do you want to serve? So that's the second question in the development of the strategy process, right? So if you're going for a 15% growth, it might lead you to looking at a customer set A. But if you're looking at a 50%, then you got to look at a different customer group. And so what we did is we went through the process and came up with an answer to who do you want to serve, which is all about who has the latent potential to deliver your how big growth goals. Really, really, really important. And the second part of that is, and what do they crave? So, Michael, this is where I really deviated. There's a lot of people that really think customer needs are important. I don't. I do not think a customer need is important at all. And the reason for that is people basically have their needs already satisfied. There's so many suppliers out there, right? What the secret is here is if you can figure out what they desire, what they lust for, what they covet, and what they crave, if you can figure that out, that's a sweet spot that, first of all, doesn't have any competitors in it because nobody's thinking this way. And secondly, it's price insensitive, right? And so if you want to avoid the commodity thing, you got to figure out what they crave. And so how big do you want to be? Where are you going to get the money? And what do they crave? Huge first 2 pieces. The third part of the equation is how are you going to compete and win? That's all about differentiation. And so I had to create a process called the only statement in order to differentiate ourselves from everybody else. And it's interesting because if you look out there, most companies will use the words like better, we're best, we're number one, we're the market leader. And the fact of the matter is, my friend, they mean nothing. It's claptrap. Because what does best really mean? Who defines it, right? What are the criteria, et cetera? So I came up with this concept called the only statement, which is really simple. It says, we are the only ones who. We're not the best. We are the only ones. So it's binary. It can be observed.
Sure.
It's either
Makes
on
sense.
or off. And so what we ended up doing is creating a strategy based on answering those 3 questions. And we renewed it every year. The focus was on execution, not the efficacy of the plan, not the degree to which the plan conformed to academic planning principles. Because I got really not very, very little good to say about those. Because while you're planning, the bad guys are out there eating your lunch. And so this is all about getting it just about right and executing it as fast as you can and learning from execution. Okay, so that's what we did. And we just hit the bricks running. And so that was one of many kind of like
So,
off the wall approaches.
so I'm assuming this process has to be evolving because, if today you are the only, and then all of a sudden everyone else sees what you're doing, you're gonna have a lot of other companies trying to focus on what you are the only
Yeah,
within.
interesting.
How do you redefine what you're doing when
Yeah,
that
so
happens?
there's a couple of points. First of all, there's very few companies that actually understand what the only statement is all about because they're so
Sure.
mesmerized around claptrap about better and best and universal or unique selling propositions that are promulgated by quote the experts. They're so
Right.
infatuated with that they don't pay much attention to something a little thing called the only statement. And so you can get away with this for a while. But the
So you just
second
can't
thing I
tell
want to
anybody what your only is.
well, actually, it becomes your elevator speech.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
do because you have to test it, you
Yep.
have to execute on it, and you have to refine it. And so, what I say to clients, because I do a lot of work with particularly small businesses, and
Yep.
they love the idea, is that you got to treat it as a draft. It's always a draft. I mean, life is a draft, for God's sake. The only
Yep.
statement, to your point, is a draft. You have to be prepared to shift, break away, and move based on what's going on in the marketplace. And so you never, which is kind of like the antithesis of what we've been taught, right? We've been taught to get the job done and it's over, satisfy the objective, boom, right? But that's not the way this works. You get the objective, you get an only statement, it's a draft, you start working with it, and you change it on the fly as you need to. Now, a lot of people get really uncomfortable with that whole notion. Like, what? Changing it on the fly? What is that all? But that can't be right. Of course, they get all bent out of shape because they don't understand the world of execution is a world of dynamics. It's a
So
world of dynamics.
absolutely. So from where you sit, how do you define being different, and why is it so crucial to this whole strategy?
So, yeah, how do I define being different? Is all about doing things uniquely in a way that people care about. Like, it's not narcissism. Like, there's a lot of people that misunderstand me when I talk to them about it. They think it's the color of their hair or their pronouns or their sexual preferences or the coolness of their body piercings. It's not about that. Okay, you do what you want, okay, in that respect. But if you want to be different in the way I'm talking about, it's to figure out who you want to serve, what they crave, and actually delivering unique value into that craving set in a way that nobody else does. So it's about them, not you. It's about serving other people as opposed to taking care of your own needs. And that's the key. Okay. There's a lot of people get messed up in this and they think, wow, if I do insane things, I'm actually doing what Roy wants. No, you're not. It's not about you, it's about them. And so my observation over several decades is that the organizations that are good at this, okay, even though they may not call it only, but a lot of them use the words, but they're kind of off a little bit, but they survive. The people that copy others, right? Like I spent a lot of time, castigating organizations that benchmark others because benchmarking is nothing but copying. Even if you do it quickly, a fast follower is still a copycat, right?
Sure.
Under the guise of innovation, they say that, which I think is intellectually dishonest, quite frankly. And I'm saying, put the textbook down, stop gargling Google. Like, most people, when they have a challenge, what do? You go and Google what other people are doing and you try and copy it. Are you kidding me? How can you possibly say that's being innovative and feeding the creativity process when you're copying somebody else? And so I say create, don't copy. And a lot of my work is associated with trying to get people to understand that there is a time and place for copying, but it's not at the strategic table because all you're
Yeah, and I
doing
I think
is
that's
getting
really
into strategic convergence, which leads you nowhere.
yeah, I think that's very interesting because my two companies that I've had over many years, that's my exact philosophy. And you just articulated that, but I never look at what other companies are doing. how they're doing it, where they are. I
Yeah.
figure out what it is that I want to execute on, and I do it. And I think that is a differentiator in and of itself, because clearly, if you're looking at everything else that's out there, all you're going to end up with is a copy of what's out there, and not something unique and different.
Well, good for you, because you're one of a few people, business leaders, that actually understand that. Because at the end of the day, if all you're doing is copying, first of all, you're dishonest. You're not being creative and innovative, and all you're doing is increasing the denominator of sameness by one. That's all you're doing. You're not
Now,
adding
I
any value.
absolutely, and I will share with you, getting a unique and novel product to market. When you get it to market, you're going to hear from all of your customers what your competitors are doing.
Mhm.
But hopefully, at the end of the day, what you're doing is, just as you said, unique and different. So
Yep.
I know you've, just to give you a little bit of a shameless plug, but I know you've written several books over the years. And, just, I don't know if you can easily do this having authored these books, but can you take a look at the library of books that you've created? And is there a book or two that you feel is the most relevant for today's business climate, or do you think each offers a unique perspective on subjects that are important overall in today's climate?
Yeah. So the original "Be Different or Be Dead" book was I wrote in 2009. So I've been banging away at this stuff for a while, and it
Sure.
was called Your Business Survival Guide, and it was written at a time where the economy was challenging for most businesses. So the theme was, if you're not different, you're dead. So there's no way you're going to survive, right? So the principles were sort of survival centric. When I wrote it, I got a number of people saying, well, I kind of want to, because it was structured in marketing and sales and customer service and strategy, et cetera. So I had a number of people saying, well, I'm kind of interested in the marketing piece, Roy. Can you give us a bit more on that? So I published a series of ebooks after that, right, which really took a vertical slice down through the original Be Different or Be Dead. And 2 years ago, decided that it needed kind of like a do-over. And I
Okay.
needed to change the focus because the world was changed, and most organizations are challenged with growth. When I talk to business leaders, what keeps you awake at night, what keeps them awake at night is the ability to grow their business and get some sort of sustaining value that they're creating. And so that the latest book built around growth, basically, and this is interesting because it never occurred to me to leverage the fact that we created this business we took to $1 billion. It was my publisher that said, Roy, you're looking at the title and you don't even know it. And he was absolutely right. Morgan James out of New York, by the way, tremendous publisher. And
Sure.
so that book, the latest book, I would say is the refreshed version. The principles are the same. Michael, all I've done is updated it with more examples, different kind of like writing style to address people's learning needs differently, et cetera, because you always learn about that over time. And I would say that book is probably where people should go
Got
to
it.
get
Got it.
yeah, to kind of get today's relevancy around Be Different or Be Dead. But you can go back and pick out um, a leadership ebook that I've written, and it's just as relevant today as it was whenever I wrote the ebook. I mean, this stuff is like it's always on. It's never off, right? The shelf life of differentiation is forever. I mean, it's
Yeah.
one
So
of the
this is
first.
timeless. It's evergreen. It
Yeah,
really is just foundational principles and
yeah, and
strategies.
it's
So
it, and yet people are not taught this. Is the other point I want to make. So you will not find, okay, the stuff in my book anywhere else, and there's a reason for that. Okay, academics don't like it because it's practical, right? Like I can't give you a bunch of formulas. I once had a podcast host to say, "Well, yeah, Roy, you talk about hiring for goosebumps. Like, do you have any studies that show how that particular tactic drove revenue. So what they're looking for is a frickin' formula, right? And I go, no, all I can tell you is we did all this stuff, and together, I'm confident, right, that the synergies among all these elements helped us get to $1 billion. And I'm not going to take the time to figure it out, even though I have a math background. I could probably figure out a least squares formula. I
And
could do
you know,
that.
it's so interesting because you're right. That is exactly what academia and all of the traditionalists out there are looking for. But I think it's only taken you some 20 odd years to get to where you are. But at the end of the day, you've come up with a very clear and succinct strategy. You've broken it out for people to understand what the common elements are that make it happen. But from all of your experiences and working with so many companies and entrepreneurs over the years, are there a handful of big mistakes that you see companies making over and over again when they're trying to stand out in terms of differentiating their business?
Well, I think the fact that they don't consider differentiation as an important element of strategy, I think is where I would go on this. Like I'm always asked, what's the biggest challenge in business today? And I always say differentiation, differentiation, differentiation. It's falling into the trap, okay, of actually believing that today's unique value proposition or unique selling proposition formulas will actually work. And I don't know if you've, I mean, I read a lot of this stuff, and I'm quite frankly, I'm disgusted by it. And I know that's a strong word, but that's exactly how I feel about it. It leads people to believe that if you follow the sort of pedantic approach to defining what you're unique at, it actually leads you to believe that it will be successful. And it won't. And because it leaves out one important thing, it talks about what you think you're good at. I don't care what you think you're good at. What I care about is what you're good at in a different way that satisfies the cravings of the people you're trying to speak to. And that element of it, which is the be different element, is woefully missing today. It is just absolutely MIA. And it drives me crazy. And I think one of my failings is to not have been able to make what I would call a significant dent, okay, in that. To have been able to sort of shift, the sort of direction the train is on. And that is because I think I underestimated the power, okay, of traditional academics, which I was a part of, but I decided to break away from because it wasn't working for me. And trying to convince people to get off that train, not throw it away, just get off it and add something else, right? I'm disappointed
Yeah, and
because
it totally makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm sure there are many individuals listening to this podcast right now that have been or have spent their entire life thinking of that perfect idea to start a business or the perfect time to make a transition in their existing company, and they're looking for that exact perfect idea or time. And I know your philosophy of execute first, plan second, probably ties right into that. So can you give me a little bit of your take on that area?
yeah, it's all based on the fact that we need to seek imperfection fast. Okay, there's no silver bullets in this. You'll never get it right the first time, notwithstanding TQM and all of the total quality management teachings of the past, right? It's a theoretical aspiration. The reality is we all live in a red ocean, hungry competitors trying to kill us every day, right? So the notion is I need to do some stuff fast. I need to learn from it, and I need to recreate my direction based on what I've learned. I call that planning on the run. Execute first, plan second. Get it done, learn, and move on. To me, that's the only formula that works today. I mean, how on earth can anybody accurately, quote, predict what's going to happen to them as a business in 36 months? I mean, it's absolutely stupid and shameful as a business leader to be so pompous to actually have that perspective of themselves, right? The right attitude is, well, you know what? I think this is the right way to go. Let's just head west. Let's execute on some critical fundamentals, right, around differentiation, and let's see where that takes us. And if we have to change, boom, we'll change. Not a problem. Okay. But we're not going to put a stake in the ground that says we will achieve this end game in 5 years. I mean, the 5-year plan is nonsensical. I mean, it's actually risky. People will say to me, well, gee, Roy, I mean, if you do a 24-month plan, isn't that risky? Yes. You know what's even riskier is to do a 5-year plan, because I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. You know, the old hockey stick, right? Well, if we don't get it done today, well, we'll get it done in year 3 because we got a 5-year plan. And so that leads to procrastination and pontification, not execution. And if you're not executing, you're doing dick. I'm sorry, you really are. I mean, get over yourself. Really, it's not about your mind. It's about what you physically do in the market to light fires in people and get things done. And that's execution.
Got it. And I know a lot of, executives are probably listening to this podcast and saying, I want to foster a culture of innovation in my organization. And audacious thinking is clearly one way to get there. But how do I roll it out in my organization? What's the practical nuts and bolts of that?
Well, yeah. So leaders need to pronounce, okay, the end of benchmarking. They need to say, we will never copy, to our conversation a bit earlier. We are going to get rid of the notion of benchmarking and copying because we find it repugnant, and it is exactly the opposite of what we want to achieve. We want to be creators, not in the market, not copiers. Okay. We need to introduce the notion of trying in our performance management system. We need to measure people on how much failure they've achieved and how much they've learned from the failure process. So it can be done. I mean, but you need to inculcate that whole notion in the systems of the organization. Performance management is a great, people do what they're paid to do. And if I said to you, Michael, how many times, and I used to do this all the time, how many times did you fail last week? Your first impulse is going to be to try and convince me that you didn't fail. And the reason for that is failure is not an option. Okay? We've been taught that it's not an option. And of course, you'll say, Roy, you'd be happy, Roy, didn't fail at all. And I'd say, no, I'm not happy. What the hell were you doing if you didn't fail? You've achieved nothing. Yeah, exactly. And so trying to get that sort of cultural shift around doing things without an outcome. As long as you learn, and this is the thing, you can fail, but you better not make the same mistake twice. So like, I'm relentless on that, and I was. And so there's ways of doing that are not known by the HR community, Michael. Or it's not HR development, the shit that we're talking about here. It is practical, simple stuff that works in the real world. It's called tries management, if you want to put a label on it.
Sure. So if you were sitting across the table from a startup founder, for example, who wants to achieve rapid growth in their organization, is there a piece or two of advice that you would pass along that you think is critical to helping them get there?
Yeah, and the first piece is you need to get your head straight around this notion of differentiation. Okay, I'll repeat it and repeat it and repeat it because it's not being done. If you want a better career, if you want a better business, if you as an entrepreneur are wondering how to make your brilliant idea successful, you need to take a step back and ask the question, how is this different? How am I different from everybody else out there? The world is replete with competitors. There's no such thing as existing in isolation. And so the only statement, which I talk about a lot in my work, I am the only one who does something, is the critical element. And in fact, I've said to CEOs of startups, I asked them, "How's your idea? Interesting technology," because they wax eloquently about the technology, right? Which I, of course, I don't care about because it's irrelevant to me what the technology is. You don't sell technology, right? You sell solutions. You sell that sort of thing. So I say to them, "How's it different?" And most of them, to be honest, have difficulty with that because they haven't thought about it. And I will always tell them, okay, stop spending money. Okay, put the money back in your pocket. Go figure that out. I can help you with that. Let's go figure out how you're going to be unique, how you're going to be the only one that does what you do. The only one that does what you do. You're not going to be better. You're not going to be best. You're going to be the only one. Let's figure that out first. And so to me, that is the kind of like linchpin, okay,
And
of success.
I understand and I hear your passion, and I know you've had a long, successful career. What keeps you motivated to share this knowledge?
It's in my DNA, Michael. I mean, that's all it is. It's running through my veins. Okay, this is for me. This is not an intellectual exercise. It's an
Yeah, it's
emotional, passionate
second
journey.
nature.
Okay, and
Got
I've
it.
seen it. Okay, the reason I'm passionate about it, it's not because it's a cool idea. I mean, I wouldn't be talking to you about the only statement if it didn't work. It was instrumental in getting us to $1 billion in annual sales. What the hell is complicated about understanding that?
And
Why is it?
what more do you need to know, right? I mean,
Boom. Why
that's the
is it that
key.
people question it?
So
Why?
one,
Yeah.
yeah, and one final thought. So, a lot of executives, a lot of individuals, a lot of people are listening to the podcast, and I guess if you were to share one lesson or one experience that people can take away from this episode, what would that be?
Well, I'm sorry to repeat myself, but I would like to start to move the differentiation dial. Okay, we really need to. Like, I imagine a society, okay, where there is true uniqueness in the world. I imagine a society where people are thirsting to stand out, not fit in. I imagine a world where narratives are created around differences, okay, that matter to people, right? Not similarities that don't really mean anything other than serving narcissism. I imagine a world where entitlement goes away, because if you are actually different in a way that other people care about, guess what you're doing, right? You're getting rid of the whole, entitlement, not because it's about them, not about you. In today's world, it's all about us. And I find that a very disturbing thought. And so be different or be dead is a mantra, and it's a call to action that I would hope um, that people at least give it a chance to witness and to actually realize the joy and the benefits that come from it.
Roy, thank you so much for sharing your insight on the software spotlight this week. I know, let's face it, if one individual has come away with a clear understanding of where they need to head, I think you've done your job. But Roy Osing, founder and author of Be Different or Be Dead, we're going to leave a link in the show notes for anybody that would like to either reach out or get a copy of your book or books, shall we say. Also, for anyone that's listening who is not signed up for our weekly email newsletter, just head over to softwareoasis.com to sign up for a copy of that. And next Wednesday, we have our webinar on cybersecurity. So that's one not to miss. That's Wednesday at 1 o'clock, and we'll have some, actually, 4 top cybersecurity experts speaking across that 1 hour. So it's one action-packed hour of education and knowledge. So once again, Roy Osing, thank you for joining us on the Software Spotlight this week.
You're welcome, Michael. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.